No. Security fingerpainting, golly, and trying to make the color purple. Everybody's heard the terms. We don't red team, we don't blue team, we purple team, right? So we're going to talk a little bit about that methodology tonight. Brooks?
So introductions, like Jason, I'm a Fair State grad, Information Security Intelligence, which was their start at Information Security Program Core. I have a healthy suspicion certs. I won't list them. The only way to get them from me is if you're an auditor, and in which case I'll still probably have you talk to someone else.
Or a pipe wrench. Oh, wait.
No pipe wrenches. I have a history of incident response, management, risk and compliance. I've cycled many teams because if there's a problem and I'm on a brother team, I'm going to try to help out. Favorite, probably being mediator for tabletops, getting to help others go through their own processes and learn. And with that, I have worked with Jason doing things like certificate, incident response, and a whole bunch of other fun stuff.
I am sorry. So I'm Jason. I've got a computer information systems degree from Fair State. I am a CEH, certified ethical hacker, and a CHFI, certified hacking forensics investigator. Both of those are from EC Council. Yes, I know it's bad. So I started my professional life as a developer, slinging code for Uncle Sam, and I also am a part-time adjunct professor with a company that shall remain nameless and blameless. So, proceed. Cool.
So what the fun are we going to talk about? Jason and I both play a side to a coin. I'll be playing blue team today, going over defensive methodology, things you want to know as a blue teamer, and kind of what your baseline should be. On the other side, Jason will be covering offensive methodology, what you want to know when you're picking a target and going after them. Then we're going to cover tools and how they fit in, all either free or freemium, meaning they're free and you can pay for more. Showdown, Google Hacking Database, no acronyms allowed, Jason.
Dang it.
Wireshark, Nmap Scripting Engine, and Zenmap.
And we will probably add color commentary to each other's pieces and parts, so bear with us. Question?
Isn't Zenmap just Nmap?
Yes. Don't steal our
And
thunder.
wait till you hear the Nmap Scripting Engine is just a scripting engine built into Nmap. So
It's wild.
So starting off with blue teaming, instead of giving you tools and logs to go after, I'm going to give you ideas because there is no two blue teams that are the same. If they are, they're lying. Best thing you can do is know your normal. You need to know who you need to know. If you have a network team or a network person, know who they are, because chances are, no matter how much you want to learn, if they have tribal knowledge, there will be a great amount of value there. And also, when you want to put in tools in the future to get better network knowledge, you're going to need their buy-in or you will put yourself in a bad way. But what you should know is things like what services are you running, what applications matter to your business. If I want to put a tool in, if you can justify protecting those crown jewels, whether it's a set of customer information or critical MRI machines, knowing what's important to your business will give you what's important to you, and it will give you a baseline to build off of. And the when, you should prepare first. That's to say, if you come into a situation saying, I need to set up this log forwarding, this monitoring tool, you've already lost because you don't truly know where those pieces need to go. Detection comes next. So once you have an idea of what your core applications are, you want to know what they're doing. A SIM can be a great way to do that, whether you're using something like Datadog or you have millions and you're using Splunk. The idea is...
What's that acronym stand for? SIM?
Security Information Event Management. Thank you for making me use multiple syllable words. So with that, getting all your information in the same place, you can even have it be simple as Windows event forwarding. Tons of great articles on there. I won't bother you listing them all, but they're out there. Firewalls are a very basic network defense. Many places already have them in place. Talk to your network team, be your network team, know where they are, and know where their syslog can go out to. And then other tools, if you have a network team already in-house, if you have an app team already in-house, they're going to care about their uptime. Chances are they aren't checking that manually. If you can't get your own tools, other team bought is fine. After that, you want to start analyzing. As a human, this means know what normal is, know what applications you're seeing. Start pulling out what services you see on your network. Coming in as a blue team, if it's a mature organization, there may already be bad there, but what you want to do is get that idea of baseline. Also get those connections into other teams. When they are reviewing their downtimes, get into those calls, figure out what can knock you over, what is, and what can't. Then it comes to responding. So say you have a security event, you want to know how to contain something. Do you have the maturity of a program on that endpoint, like an EDR, saying, yep, I'm going to isolate this endpoint? Do you have to do it at the network layer? Are you locking out credentials? Work through these things before it comes time to actually respond to an event. Eradication. If one thing got in that way, don't assume that's the only thing that got in. Go into your research phase. Okay, was this an exploit? Was this leaked credentials? Was this an attack on the service? And then everywhere else you are using those credentials for that service, make sure you're following up. It can be really easy to fall into the whack-a-mole of, I see something, I take it out, and then I'm fighting the same problem a week later because I didn't close that original hole. And then, of course, restore. If you take a service down and you're saying, hey, this is being exploited, I think they can move laterally, you have to come back up. That's how business runs. It's easy to say, yep, I turned the server off, it is secure. Congrats, you're no longer doing business. And then review. This is when the smoke settles, when services are back up. You believe to your best that you've got rid of the threat and misconfiguration, what have you, whether it's a patch. Look at why that gap went unnoticed. Do you need to potentially build out vulnerability management? Was this a server no one knew was still running? And talk with teams that you impacted. You don't want to be that security person that comes in like a battering ram, you do your heavy hitting because you have the right, and then you leave. Work with those teams to say, hey, how do we work better together in the future? Having that human follow-up actually matters. And that's Clippy reminding me to be a human, because it's easy to say, logs say this, we're doing this, process does that. You're impacting other people's workflows. Just like if someone said, hey, we're not sending you logs anymore because our bandwidth can't handle it. Make sure it's a dynamic conversation versus all directives. And then the people who don't have to care about their follow-up is the red team. You can skip that out.
So what is red teaming? You're going to have different schools of thought on this, and it's important to remember we show this linearly, but realistically, it's very, very cyclical. I don't usually just perform recon all before starting an engagement. I definitely do perform recon every time before starting an engagement, but there's many engagements where you'll come back to doing additional recon. When you see something shiny, ooh, that looks promising, you chase it down, you go after it. So the call outs here with the recon phase is what's footprinting, it's identifying targets, it's identifying guesstimates as to what the things are based upon the behavior that you see. We're going to talk about how we use Zenmap, Nmap, whatever your soup du jour is. We're going to map out the network. We're going to provide for enumeration of identifying what's on that network as a best guess. That recon is all broken up into either active or passive. We blur that in this one stage is the also piece that we need to discuss. The weaponization. So we've taken a look at the network. We've transitioned from passive into active. We see specific things on the network. I see SMB. That's tasty. We can go ahead and create a payload for SMB. We've got tools at our disposal to help us out with this. Metasploit, MSF Venom, Google Hacking Database all have great starter snippets of code or already pre-crafted shells. We'll get into how you could potentially use Meterpreter and have connectivity in through Metasploit Framework, which we'll talk about in a second here. But the call out is that when you're weaponizing, you're preparing to go after the target, you're going ahead and tweaking it to their environment. I'm not going to run exploits against an organization that only runs x64 based operating systems and devices if they run ARM processors, right? Makes absolutely no sense. It's not going to work. So that weaponization stage is where you want to pay attention to what your target actually contains. Okay. Delivery. This is where the fun comes in. So everybody's heard of USB rubber ducky before, or other tools like it, Bash Bunny, all sorts of fun, cool Hack5 products. Shameless plug, sorry. But the call out there is that there's probably a tool for you to do your delivery. And let's not forget, people are silly. It's the year 2022, and we still open the link in the email, for crying out loud. We have got to do a better job of training our user populace.
Or stopping the bad links before they get there.
Yep. So that's where tools come into play, and we'll talk about that in a little bit. But one of the things that I really liked about, oh crud, it's got the URL rewrite, and it's got the, dang it, I managed it. Tap and trap, yeah. Who's that? Oh, thank you. Proofpoint. Couldn't think. So Proofpoint allows you to basically rewrite the URLs that come in inside the emails, and it defangs them because it actually runs it through a sandbox, detonates it. Now, there's lots of ins and outs to it, but it works exceptionally well. It's one of the better ones. What's that? Yeah, yeah, sorry, that's fair. So the call out here is that when you do delivery of your weaponized payload, you want to take into account those things that exist. If I know that my target has proof point, I'm going to pick a better way of delivering that's going to result in better success, aka USB, because what does proof point see? Email. What does it not see? Anything on a USB stick. And unfortunately, people are real good about taking those things and plugging them into their machines, as we saw at former employer. Exploit control. So in here, once we get that initial foothold, we want to then pivot to either privilege escalation or controlling that foothold that we've got. We want to establish persistence. This is where we dump in our keyloggers, our remote desktop connections, our executables. The executables are the binaries that we use to either elevate privilege or go after some other services. Everybody's heard of process hollowing, process shimming, all that fun stuff. So the call out here is that when we get that initial foothold, we're looking to do other things to that box so that we can persist on it and expand upon our control of it, okay? When it gets to the actions here, this is usually what you would consider at the tail end of your exploitation chain. What you're doing is you're pumping data out. Exfiltrate is just a fancy word for get the heck out of there with what you came in after. You are destroying content. If you're unsuccessful, a lot of adversaries, if they can't get at what they want to, they throw a temper tantrum like a toddler and they just burn it all down, right? So if I enact a distributed denial of service attack against you, I have destroyed your ability to actually conduct business by making all of your servers inactive for you to generate revenue. I also pivot deeper into the network in a lot of instances here. So let's say I get onto your web server that's out at your perimeter. You've got additional controls, good Lord, I hope, that prohibit that thing from being able to talk to user space and or services. So we have the ability to penetrate deeper into the network from this step. And then we talked a little bit briefly about Metasploit Framework. It's got a whole bunch of tools in it. It's got the ability to capture information, to stuff it into the framework. There's a backend database, so I can actually keep track of IP addresses. I can keep track of compromised credentials. It's a Swiss Army knife. Metasploit Framework is a lot of functionality that you can utilize and should in your engagements. I think that covers everything.
Tagging on top of this, in the blue team, when you're doing recon and you're analyzing, you can almost treat this methodology as answering how bad is it. So recon, if I see a bad IP connected to my network and that's something a firewall is flagging, figure out why. Because if you're going to investigate every time a bad IP connects to your public website, you are going to drown yourself. The blue team will be the ocean you are sitting at the bottom of hoping to grow gills. On the other hand, if you see Metasploit Framework running on one of your hosts, if you see MSF Venom in command line, you're going to want to know, one, is that a security professional or someone who has reason to be running this? Or two, am I about to make some phone calls and make someone's afternoon far more interesting? The same thing, when you are hearing about exploits on the news, absolutely dive in. Even if you don't want to be running them, if you don't have the resources to do a VM, look at what these attackers are doing, because you'll see methodologies start to stick out. All right, so the first thing they noticed was a beacon, followed by data moving, then ransomware, because not only did they lock it, they proved they had a copy. These patterns will show up again and again in any InfoSec person's career. That while all humans are different, some people will run in like battering rams. You'll see full scans from the same IP followed by different protocols, followed by, all right, now we're getting 300 emails from this false domain that's trying to copy ours, but they pulled all of your contact forms. So they have your icon, they know vaguely who's responding because this has been a thought out attack. Those kind of things you can learn by watching these red team methodologies. Now it may be structured, it may be a script kiddie that went, cool, Spring Shell, I want to do that, and they just so happen to hit your server. And that goes back to the blue team methodology of recon, knowing your internal structure, knowing what you need to know, because then you know, all right, so they pulled that form, it may be this contact thing, yep, that's our sales team, versus, okay, yeah, that icon hasn't been used in about 10 years by this company. It may seem like simple things to know that, oh yeah, well, that doesn't really matter. Why would I care what our icons look like? That gives you a date of when that record of sale or that PDF that they're faking an invoice came from, and potentially how they could have gotten it. Yes.
It sounds like you're saying you need to talk to other people in the business. Is that an accurate summation that you should talk to people in the business?
Yep, you should. So
And within your company, within the industry, all of the above. So don't just limit it to just your business, your company, your vertical. Make sure you talk outside, because unfortunately, as we see time and time again in ISACA, it's not just one vertical that suffers these problems. It's multiples. So absolutely agree with you that you want to talk in your own organization, but you also want to talk external. That's why these are so important, huh? Funny how that works. Sorry.
Fun comparison would be like down detector. If you're hit by something and it hits hard, chances are other people have too. And what you do when you see Amazon's down, you scroll down. Is it login issues? Is it service issues? So when you're seeing ransomware, okay, scroll down, see, all right, this is targeting healthcare, or this is being sent by email campaign. And all those things, you get that data because other people are posting it. And as you mature as a blue teamer, you'll say, okay, this is okay to post. I've redacted my company information. I'm not going to hey guys, so I work at this company and we just got hit by ransomware because we left XP exposed to the internet. Don't do that. But if you see what we'll get into later, Google Hacking Database, where they give you the proof of concept code, if you're saying, hey, I found this one thing consistently lines up with this attack methodology, absolutely find a safe forum, take out your company data and give it to others, because that's how we learn together.
Completely concur. Give back to your community as much as you can. So, I love this. It does. But so, who here has heard of OWASP? Open Web. Go ahead. Open Web Application Security Project. And the call out here is that they've been giving back to the communities for decades at this point. I think they were founded back in the late 80s, early 90s, if memory serves.
I wasn't there.
Okay. I keep forgetting that. So why we mention them, they every couple of years, and it was 4 years is the last spread. So the last one was 2017. Present one that we're presently working off of is 2021. As you can see, not a whole lot new there, okay? We still are dealing with the same darn things that we've been working at for decades at this point. The patching is going to continue to be a problem because people don't put the impetus, I don't know what to call it, the due diligence, the importance, the ability to think outside of the fact that I just want to keep my server up all the darn time. So we have to keep in mind that we do have to perform patching, and that requires a maintenance window. The blue team should probably be pushing pretty hard against the internal organization to patch stuff, because it's real easy for me to come in with exploits that are X number of years old when they haven't been patched out of the darn thing. And for the love of God, do not think that just because you applied the patch, you're done. Most of the patches that apply require a bounce, shutting down the server and turning it back on. Quote the IT crowd, right? We see that OWASP hasn't transitioned a whole bunch from 2017 to 2021. They've consolidated groupings. The other piece that I want to make sure we mention is OWASP, the top 10, what is that? It's a sample. So we talk about securing our web servers and we gauge it against the OWASP top 10. How many other exploits are there out there? Infinite. Don't forget, OWASP is just designed as a rudimentary benchmark. If you actually want to test your servers, run something like ASVS, okay? ASVS, I can't remember what the acronym stands for. It's the whole slew of testing methodology to go through via OWASP for your web server. So it's much more exhaustive. The other piece that we wanted to talk about here, there are plenty of opportunities for, everybody's heard of CTFs, right? Wargaming, CTFs, ways that you can practice your craft legally without ending up in an orange jumpsuit. So we want to call these out. Try Hack Me, Hack the Box, Black Box, OWASP, PBWA. That's the broken, wait.
That's
EWAP.
DVWA.
Yeah, DVWA. Yeah, what's OWASP, PBWA?
Web app.
Damn vulnerable. Yeah, that's right.
Yes.
You mentioned that sometimes you need to bounce a service to make sure that the patches are flat appropriately. Would it also be a wise idea to redo your scanning to make sure that
Yes.
vulnerability is no longer showing up?
Absolutely. So security, what's the mantra? Trust but?
Trust but verify. So anytime you're applying patches, there's a few things you want to do. One, I'm going to step back about 12 sentences or so. I heard the term change window. So it's easy for us to say it's not during business hours we're going to do this thing. Chances are, if you're pushing large amounts of data, your app teams are going to be doing the same thing. Hey, we're going to refresh our database because it's after hours and if service is slow. What is it? You want to work with them, talk to them. You want your change window, your reboot time, your patching time to work with their heavy load times. You don't want to do it at the same time, you're going to make enemies. And then that also follows up once you're patching, if you're updating the application, if you're updating the operating system, make sure, does it need a reboot? And is that service still open or changed? If you're using third-party applications, pick on your vendors. If they say, yep, we fixed this vulnerability with our latest version, hit it again after you update that version. Keep them honest. The same for open web applications. If they're third party, if they're open source, it doesn't matter. If that library is still there that's vulnerable, see if it's running, see if it's loading. If you have the ability, take away that library. If they say we're no longer dependent on it, and if the app doesn't run, chances are they're still running it. I'm not saying you have to get that deep with every vulnerability you're validating, but absolutely, if your scans come back, if you have a trusted tool, whether it's something like Rapid7, Nmap, or just looking at process data for what's loading and unloading, trust that data and work with it.
Absolutely concur. And don't forget, like you just mentioned, if you see that package there, but you don't see it being used, what's the next logical step? Pull it. Your attack surface matters. There's absolutely no reason to leave it there unless you're actually using it. In my day job, I just recently went through that with the team and we gutted like 30 some odd packages. So the call out there is that don't let them persist in your environment without ever revisiting them. So now we get to talk about mixing the colors. We talked earlier about the fact that this is represented linearly, but realistically, it's floating all over the place throughout all the steps in a typical engagement where you'd see somebody coming at you. They are constantly changing up what their payloads that they're delivering to you are. They are going ahead and going after services as they discover them. They're mixing these stages from a red team perspective. They do the same thing for the blue team, but the blue team has a couple of things that make it harder. We'll talk about those in just a minute. But the red team, how many times does the red team have to get it right versus how many times does the blue team have to get it right?
Just once.
Exactly. It's an unfair equation because as the red teamer, my bar is much, much, much lower. For blue team, you have to get it right every stinking time. So I'm a big proponent of work together because if I just come in and I smash and grab all the things that I want to on the engagement, but I don't educate the blue team, how successful am I as a pen tester? The joke that we have within the industry is you're always getting the penetration test, you're just not getting the report, right? So leverage the fact that we've got an engaged blue team to help with understanding what they can do to detect the crap that was successful that I threw at them.
And the same thing goes when you're seeing these new exploits out. Red team can't do this all without touching your network. They can't take the data without getting to the data. They can't get the data out without moving the data. So knowing what you can know, if red team decides I'm going to hollow out this process and masquerade using the libraries they already have, I'm going to start living off the land. Blue team's going to double down and say, yep, I know that PSExec is only used in this region of my network or on these type of hosts. Or I'm going to say our developers or IT team aren't using PSExec, so we're going to start flagging on that. You can live off the land. I'm going to watch the land. If you're going to bring in an invasive species of PSExec, I'm going to start ripping it out.
Exactly.
And there comes that balance where every time red team does something, it's the same with malware. You can hide, but you must run. If you're using resources on an asset, if it's on the server, if you're tricking users into trying to make an email forwarding rule because you're on Microsoft and you need to see all their emails to make sure Exchange is working, we're going to start watching the forwarding rules. And it's all different levels of maturity. You live at what you have.
I'm a big proponent of the intel that you get from your own organization is some of the most actionable intel you're ever going to get. Doesn't matter what the industry partner is that you're working with is, you know what's coming at you. If you know that, you can start to identify where the abnormalities are coming in at. So as an adversary, if I'm trying to drop malware on your system, I'm trying to get a web shell, I'm trying to do something to your environment, I'm going to be impactful. And if you already know what that impact is, you've got half the battle won right there. We can't detect weaponization, but you can prep for it, right? So what we're talking about here is, I've got this new awesome fileless malware, right? What's fileless malware do? Dumps into memory, right? It executes all from there. What does it not persist beyond? If I power it off, what happened to it? It's gone. So as an adversary, I'm looking for a persistence hook immediately if that's my goal. If it's not my goal, I'm looking to pivot deeper into the network, compromise something else. But that type of behavior should be detectable. We talked a little bit about EDRs. EDRs are fantastic in helping us immensely with the regard that the activity that I perpetrate against them is getting better and better at being detected. Everybody's heard of Black Hills Information Security, right? One of the gentlemen there, I'll keep his name off the record, but what he was commenting on was that Windows Defender is actually getting to be a viable solution, which is crazy talk, right? Everybody says, oh, it's just Microsoft. Well, because they see so much of the payloads, the detonations of the malicious things taking place, because they own the OS, they are stepping up their game in a big, big way with regards to being able to detect that stuff. So keep that sort of stuff in mind at the back of your head that, hey, I need to understand what I'm going after target-wise to be successful at it as a penetrator. Yeah. Cool. All right, so we're going to move towards purple. So very first quote there, you're going to be challenged to know it all. Unfortunately, good, bad, or otherwise, most organizations, the second you say I'm in security, they're going to expect you to understand the operating system, the network stack. They're going to have assumptions about what your capabilities are. So you're going to have to be knowledgeable. Just because you're having to go after everything doesn't mean that that's not a benefit. Who here has heard the term jack of all trades, master of none? Who's heard the rest of the actual quote? Jack of all trades, master of none, but still better than a master of one. Okay, so the call out here is that the full quote tells you that, yeah, you can specialize, go deep in whatever you're interested in, and that's awesome, but also have that baseline knowledge, because as a defender versus as an attacker, the techniques are very similar. We've talked about that blurred line between red team and blue team. A lot of the same skills can get recycled. So as a red team, I'm concerned with attack methodologies. I'm concerned with what TTPs I am broadcasting to the larger community. I'm also very concerned with how to evade and persist. C2, everybody's heard command and control, C2, okay? When I get a foothold, a beacon, a first level incursion into an environment, what's my goal?
Persist.
Persistence
Break
is one of them.
stuff.
Break stuff is always fun, yes. Yeah. What does break stuff get? It gets caught because it goes abnormal, it bends. That's a good way to go to getting caught. I'm looking to persist. I'm looking to pivot deeper into the network. I'm looking for specific intel from the organization. How valuable is IP? Coca-Cola's secret recipe, whatever it was, it's worth what, millions, billions? It's insured for billions. So the call out there is that if I'm an adversary going after Coca-Cola's secret recipe, minus the Coke apparently, but going after that recipe, that's going to hopefully trigger a whole bunch of alarm bells in the organization. Question?
So you were talking about with getting with breaking stuff, making easier to caught. I just reminded me of one real world example from several years back. Remember Stuxnet? Yeah, one thing you have there, the whole reason it was able to hide for so long was because it wasn't trying to be break stuff unless they were just absolutely certain it was on exactly the system that it needed. Once the targeting started getting a bit looser, that's when
it started getting detected. Truth. Now, what was the goal of Stuxnet?
Usually it's worked around throughput programs.
Exactly.
Mess up with such breaches.
So the call out there is that red team if you want to call it a red team, had a very specific mission, right? And the call out there is that you've got to weigh what your mission parameters are. Old DoD dies hard. You need to weigh against what you are going after and what your capabilities are. They burned a lot of bleeding edge stuff in Stuxnet, but there was no concern about that because of what the goal was. So, but great point. So remember, your adversary is going to behave differently. We talked about TTPs a little bit, tactics, techniques, procedures. One of the cool things that we have to keep in mind is, has everybody heard the pyramid of pain? That's sounding familiar to anybody? So Black Hills Information Security did this awesome presentation about the pyramid of pain, and it's really easy for me to get indicators of compromise, but it's really awful for me to figure out what the adversary's tactics, techniques, and procedures are, because those define what that organization, that entity is. Cozy Bear, any of the other code names for Russian, right? All of those have a very specific tactics, techniques, and procedures that they're executing on depending upon the unit. And it's much harder to change those for a couple of reasons. One is that they're probably indoctrinated the same way most operators are to having a specific set of operations that they take every time they get in. So keep that in mind. Your TTPs for you as a red teamer, if you can figure out a way to roll those, it becomes much, much, much harder for Brooks to detect me in the network once I can figure out how to roll my TTPs. The reason that it's on the pyramid of pain and it's at the pinnacle of it, it's at the very top, is because it's so darn hard to change that. You literally have to change your mindset of how you approach the target, okay?
And I'm going to take two things off of that. One, the pyramid of pain, it being easy to get out IOCs. This is another place where, as blue team, I don't want anyone to go drown themselves. IOCs can be something as simple as a command line launching from a Word document. Then you'll quickly learn this one company that this one group works with. That's how they send out their updates, and you need to let that run because that group is never going to be motivated to do it another way. That's how they've always done it. On the other side, when you're getting these IOCs, it's not always going to be a one-to-one ratio. If you hear that Cozy Bear is launching MSIs that masquerade as Word docs, not every MSI you get that masquerades as a Word doc is going to be Cozy Bear. Sometimes it can be vendors deciding this is a great, unique, and easy way to get people to do our bidding because they need to install our agent, and instead of telling them things like talk to IT or please double click this executable, we're just going to give them a Word doc that says thank you for choosing our tool, click here, which conveniently is the same thing that teams will do. Thank you for partnering with this business you've never heard of. We have worked with, insert the name of your chief technology person, and we are glad to work with you. Please click here and make sure to talk to IT if it doesn't work. So there's two sides of the coin there, and that's part of where gathering all this data is helpful. Reading write-ups is helpful. We talked about war games earlier, that learning what evil is, because knowing what's normal and good, I'm not asking anyone to go and spend 8 hours a day reading all the logs from your org to memorize every process. But knowing, hey, so maybe we're launching to command line connecting to this IP that is a dynamic bucket in a country that we don't do business in might actually be worth diving more into. You don't always need attribution. Yes, it's really cool. People say, I stock ATP number this, or APT number this. Acronyms are hard. But what really matters to the organization is how far did they get? How did they get in? Did you stop it in time? And will this happen again?
Good. Oops.
Spoiler.
So some tools that we are going to talk about and we'll continue to talk about. Showdown. Everybody's heard of Showdown.io, right? Vulnerability search engine of the web, right? The cool thing about it is that it's searchable. We'll get into some of that in a little bit here. Google hacking database. The call out here is that it's got a lot of proof of concept code. It's got good information about the vulnerabilities, the exploits, all of that fun stuff in its database, and it gives you some good starting points if you're looking to roll your own exploit. Nmap and Zenmap, they are the same darn thing. Zenmap is just the pretty GUI over the top of Nmap. It's still running all the command line switches under the covers. And one of the cool things that I always teach my students is that you can use Zenmap to generate your Nmap strings that you want for it to execute whatever type of scan you're looking for. Wireshark, everybody's familiar with Wireshark, I would hope, but if not, it's a packet sniffer. It's a Swiss Army knife. You can use it for all sorts of things. We can use it to display all sorts of different traffic so that we can dig into what's actually going on in that stream, unless it's encrypted, and then we have to work a little bit harder to get the keys, and then we can potentially still see into it. So, and then we talked about Metasploit Framework. Metasploit Framework, MSF, you'll hear it referred to as in most of the security community. It's a open source project where we dump a whole bunch of exploit code, but it's a Swiss Army knife. Again, like I mentioned earlier, I can use it to keep track of my engagement, where it's got artifacts from whatever I did in trying to penetrate their network. Excuse me, sorry. It's got the ability for me to keep track of credentials. It's got all sorts of cool functionality in it. So use the tools at your disposal. The other call out is, does Metasploit go anywhere aside from where you tell it to? That's the cool part about it, right? You have a whole bunch of exploits live with you that when you get inside the organization, let's say somebody engages us to go to Steelcase, and inside a Steelcase, they want me to see if I can get at their data center from inside as a regular user, right? Metasploit, it's all self-contained on my laptop. I plug in, I bypass 802.1x or not. Printers are always your friend in that regard, or phones. You go after, no, you don't. Or you're just grumpy about the fact that. So yeah, we always get in that way because, again, most devices are dumb and don't support 802.1x for a supplicant, unfortunately. So it's an easy avenue of attack. But the call out there is that I'm self-contained to my laptop going against that network, which I now have exposed because the IT folks said, hey, that printer jack is probably A-okay to leave unsecured. Womp womp.
That's a good idea. I remember that.
I promised a friend of mine that I would put this in front of people because I always say no normal fine evil, you'll know bad when you see it. And being an early blue teamer, it feels really bad not to have that baseline yet. So the code that is overlaid over our friend who is pimping his malware is encoded, and rotated, and encoded, and thrown into variables. No sane developer or program runs like this. There is no point. If I want to base 64 encode something, so I make sure a part of it's segmented in transit, it doesn't run, absolutely, I can reverse that. This is layers of obfuscation. This is something that if you see this in a PowerShell operational log, you should raise your hand, talk to your neighbor, figure out what host it actually ran on, because this is definitely not normal.
So I like that you touched on that. What was the call out with base 64 encoding? What was that word that you said there? It started with an R?
Obfuscation.
Started with an R?
It's the R silent in obfuscation.
It's reversible, so stop calling base 64 encoding encryption. I can't believe how many developers I got to slap over that one.
Don't slap your developers. See, this is why you're stuck on red team.
That's
I said we do that all developers.
it helps. It really does. Not for
That's why we're still back at low-hanging fruit of injection, because the only people who are talking to developers are like, I can't believe you do authentication like this.
Yep.
You
So-
can help.
that's a very valid point. Kid gloves. They're humans just like the rest of us. Sorry.
Red team, stop the boppers. Got it.
So Showdown, I did not notice that change. Thank you. Showdown, the refrigerator of the internet. I like that. I'm going to steal that. So the call out here is that you have access to a whole treasure trove of information about the World Wide Web, about targets, about what might work exploit-wise. Remember, we talked about know your target. The cool thing about Showdown, it did all the heavy lifting for us. Showdown.io is a search engine of what has been observed from their scanners. It's going out and saying, hey, you know that nanny cam that you forgot to secure? It's over here at this IP address. It's going out there and saying, hey, you remember that garage door opener that you put on your network that you didn't pay any attention to? It's over here at this IP address. The cool thing about Showdown is it's all tagged, it's all searchable. Okay, it's by GeoIP, and you can very easily use it to find opportunities for profit. I mean, for exploitation.
And you can also use that same data to know what you need to know. Throw your company name in here. If you have developers, see what their cert is signing on the internet. There's many different pieces of information you can key on. Where on Red Team, you might want to say, hey, I know this web camera has this cert, so I want to see what IPs it's on. As a blue teamer, I'm going to go, this is my public public IP range, what would it see what services are open? If you're not setting up your own Nmap and pushing it to a database, if you don't have a scan engine or pay for tool, Showdown's collecting that data for you, as well as many other people on the internet. The upside of Showdown is they are telling you via crypto.lock.txt on your desktop, they're telling you by a nice browsable web interface.
Exactly.
Would you recommend that corporate customers should purchase a subscription to Showdown and have Showdown automatically alert them on new services that pop up on their IP addresses?
You're going to burn through tokens, I think, with our new pay structure, but absolutely yes.
To answer that question, so question being, should enterprises pay for the Showdown Enterprise license? You unlock a few features like setting your IP ranges or web addresses, your domains, and being alerted if there are new findings or new services being spun up on your domain. The slightly more red team brain behind that is using Google fuzzing. If you go onto Showdown, you will notice you can only do certain forms of searches. The thing is, Google is indexing Showdown because people go to it. So if you want to get a little crafty and go a step above, go ahead and try to see what you can see through those Google preview results or direct click-through links. Just as you burn tokens per search on the enterprise model, you also burn free sessions. And unless you want a VPN and a fresh browser each time you're browsing Showdown, you either got to work smarter or with more money. I mean harder. Yeah.
Yeah, their new licensing model makes you burn tokens for bulk pulls of data. So it's a good way to get around it for sure. I'm sure they love mentioning it. But yes. All right. So Showdown has a whole bunch of getting started, look at this first type of tutorial videos and articles that they host. So keep that in mind. I'm not going to beat this dead horse too terribly much, but the call out is that you see latest editions. It's whatever's new and hot, return object programming, and all sorts of fun things have been coming out. If you're still dealing with SSL as opposed to TLS, I feel for you. I'm sorry, but they still call it the old term. Okay. What else do we have? Shared searches. So as a consumer on the community, you can actually share out the contents of your search, and I'll expose it to the larger community. You can share it amongst yourselves. The enterprise, I believe it allows for sharing the searches privately within the organization under their licensing model is one of the cool things about it. And the reason that you might potentially want to leverage that is if you've got a certificate signature of stuff that you know shouldn't ever be out on the public domain, that's an example of a shared search you would probably want to share within your enterprise, but probably not within the larger Showdown community, okay? Excuse me.
You can't scan Google.
Oh, jeez. So the call out here is that it detects it anywhere in what it observed. So the call out here is http://google.com is called out, but where is it located? GeoIP says Spain. So the call out here is that you can perform ad hoc searches, but don't always trust that what you see in it is actually indicative of what it is. I'll give you an example. Previous employer, who I won't mention, did a Google search for their, or sorry, not Google search, a Showdown search for their name inside results, found a whole bunch of hits. Turns out one of our partners had put the RDP's splash screen of our splash screen and our end user license agreement. Long story short, it shouldn't have been that. We got it fixed, but the call out was that when I was searching for it, I was finding their stuff that they were hosting and having the alarm bells go off going, wait a second, how did this end up here? These were all not authorized to be on public facing internet. I also found a developer that was hosting our content through his home router through RDP. We had a long chat about that. But the call out is that just because you see it doesn't necessarily mean it's as bad as it could be. It doesn't mean that it's necessarily hosted. So take your time with research. Okay. But the ad hoc searches are pretty darn powerful, and this doesn't burn tokens is the call out. If you do a bulk API pull, that's when it's going to burn tokens. Advanced searches, you can use multiple taggings there, as you can see. 53, what's 53, folks? There we go. and DNS is domain name service, since we can't use acronyms. Sorry. You can see here that we've got it sliced and diced by protocol and by GeoIP. So you can see that we're specifying port 53 in the US, and the results then are summarized in the right side there, where it talks about what it is that's actually hosting it. So you can see Linux is pretty popular, obviously, since the internet runs on Linux, and specifically 3.x kernels, it looks like. How long ago did we pull this?
I didn't pull the show.
Okay,
I
yeah.
just changed the titles.
Okay, cool. Yeah, I think that's changed. I apologize. I did not update that. So does an open port equal a vulnerable port?
No.
No. Takes further research. But what does it do? It narrows down your search. You don't have to say, hey, is this thing vulnerable? Well, if it's closed, no, probably not, because you can't get at it, right? If it's administratively downed, it could be, but focus on the low-hanging fruit first, then go after the stuff that shows as administratively downed if you're feeling ambitious, okay? But just because it's open and available does not mean that it is vulnerable. What's that?
I was just thinking necessary but not sufficient.
Yep. So what we've got here is what was the search? Oh, this is just pointing out that there's a large spread of options for things that we're going to see on Showdown. It's not good or bad necessarily. It's just intel, and it's a data point, and we need to infer from these data points what our target actually possesses. I'm not going to typically use such a broad categorization as all of these countries when I have a very specific company in mind. I'm going to go after keywords about that. This is just pointing out that you have a very large spread of information, and use the top and the filter criteria out of Showdown to figure out what you're actually looking at.
One of my favorite things on the slide on temperature check, you'll see top services being SMB, and on the top products, you'll see Ark Survival Evolved, a very lovable video game. Not every exploit or opening is done out of malice. Sometimes you have that person who has admin powers that decides, yeah, I'm going to play Minecraft on my off time, and they're going to spin up a server. So just as much as you have folks coming in and potentially trying to start services and impose as other legit business services, we'll say, you have folks just installing something because they can. This isn't to say take away everyone's admin, but yeah, sometimes you will just have open SMB on a game server and have to tell someone their lunch is about to get a lot more boring.
And I'm way meaner than Brooks is, because I definitely say take away their darn admin, because they don't need it.
There's a balance.
I know. My developers would string me up if they heard me say that, though. So, yeah, I know. Thanks. So next up, the honorable mention for Showdown exploits. So this is not going to be as great as Google Hacking Database or as what you have in terms of on Metasploit for active exploits within that database, but it ain't bad. And if you need it, it's a good way to search for specific exploits. You see here SMB. Everybody remembers server message block, and that it's vulnerable 6 ways from Sunday, depending upon version, right? So the call out here is that Showdown can help you by identifying specific exploits for specific protocols, but you're better off using something more robust like an MSF or a Google Hacking Database, but it's better than nothing, okay? I think you had the next one here, right?
So running joke, if someone reaches out to me and says, hey, you have SSH open on your IP, I'm going to go, yeah, you also need to be authenticated to do anything on that IP. So just the same way that a red teamer can hop on, Showdown, and look at all your open ports, you can do it too, same tool.
The tools work both ways.
All right, so Google Hacking Database, this is essentially 5 slides of me picking on Showdown because Google Hacking Database is cooler. It's found at exploitdb.com. And what you do here is, as a blue teamer, I'm going on here. I heard there's a new CVE. It's a 0-day. Don't know what's going on. Or I ran a scan or a tool, and it says this application is vulnerable. Two things I want to do as a blue teamer. One, is it actually vulnerable? The version I have. Can I get exploit code without having to build this 0-day myself or build out this known vulnerability myself? Second thing is I'm generally going to look at what platforms I have. So as Jason mentioned, we're challenged to know it all. So if I've never worked with a certain Cisco device, or if someone has, Raspberry Pi tops and that's their laptops, I'm going to hop on here and just get a feel for how many exploits are available. What are these exploits focused around? Because if I'm looking at Windows Server, I might see a few hundred hits for SMB. Then I can filter by what date. And then I'm starting to get a sense of, okay, where do I need to talk to my VM team? Or where do I need to become that VM team and start fixing these things?
Quick question. Who runs Google Hacking Database now? Does anybody know?
Illuminati.
Yes. No. Offensive security. So everybody's heard of Kali Linux, right? We've talked about them. Well, actually, I don't even think we have mentioned them yet, but Metasploit Framework is in Kali Linux.
I mentioned it for my presentation, I think.
Okay.
I use that exclusively.
Yep. So the call out is that the same folks that maintain Kali Linux are the ones that also maintain Google Hacking Database. And it's offensive security, and it's also OSCP certification. So, or wait, did I? Yeah, I always mix up OSCP and OCSP. Anyway, as you work, sorry. Next one.
So this is where you see it dorks it out for you. A dork is a way of using a search engine, maybe not how it's meant to be. And you can use things like wildcards when you're looking into the exploit database. Google Hacking will say, hey, these are common detection or common things to see in the URL. If you work with WordPress, you probably know admin.php. And what exploit database will go is like, hey, here's the searches other people are using. So instead of running Dirbuster and hoping for the best, it'll say, hey, here's the searches we're starting to see. This could be anything from, hey, when your WordPress is phoned and is about to sell various medicines for folks who may want to order from offshore sources, this may be a directory you want to watch for. The same way that Showdown had that save search for phone websites, you'll see the same thing in the Google Hacking Database. Instead of using Showdown's base of knowledge, so their scan result, we're using Google. Google's crawling the web, they're caching your information, similar to a way of the Wayback Machine, if you've heard of that. Google wants to know what's out there because they want to know what I'm indexing at your site and when should I start showing it to people. So in that same way, we can use Google to say, hey, have you maybe seen any open admin PHP sites around that also says version 1.2? And the exploit database will give you all of these different searches.
And from, yeah. So that's what I was just going to mention is a lot of that new traffic that you're seeing is stuff that as an adversary, I also care about as a way to upgrade my skill set, right? Because as Brooks pointed out, admin.php on WordPress, everybody knows WordPress and the plugins are vulnerable 6 ways from Sunday and have been traditionally for what, going on a decade now. No slight or shade being thrown at WordPress. They've just got a history of having some less than desirable security posture on a lot of their stuff. The call out there is that as an attacker, I am looking to continue to upgrade my knowledge base, and I am looking to leverage what other people are doing so I can learn from them as well. So, hit it. Go.
Next thing I call out on Google Hacking Database is they're sorted out by category. A foothold is a place where someone may already be persisting. It may be where that admin page has been compromised. It may be where they're serving up a false form on your legitimate edu domain. Because if I see, all right, edu, that's not a .ru address, so that's not Russian, I can click this link. Or for other things like vulnerable files, are you hosting, a bad login page, ASPX? What kind of content are you hosting? Do you show up in these searches? Another one is error messages. Both teams love error messages. As a blue team or a developer, I know what's wrong. I know the line to go fix. As a red teamer, I go, okay, so I got this far in the application until it kicked me out. Or, hey, it did remind me I am missing a colon there. Thank you. So if you're printing out error messages to the internet, that's a misconfiguration. Red team's going to jump on that because they're going to say, hey, this is a weak spot. I'm going to poke at it and see if it bruises and the arm falls off. And as a blue teamer, I'm going, all right, I need to know what's bad so I can go fix it. Question is, who's going to get to it first? And that same thing, when you go into any of these categories and you're seeing these Google alerts, it'll tell you how bad it is. A sensitive directory might be like, hey, you have your full listing of your employees with their addresses public facing. Maybe you don't do that. A small school district, you're thinking, you know what, yeah, I want to show what region like these teachers are from and what they're covering. A red teamer, I'm going like, all right, this is my new identity now. I am John Smith. I live on Apple Avenue, and I am calling because I forgot my password today. So there's a balance there. And Google Hacking Database, much like Showdown, you can treat it like a fridge. Open it up, see what's in there. Are you hungry? Pick what you want. Now, the fun part of this is giving you the exploits. Exploit database has got to the point where you can check if it's verified. So that means, yep, someone else ran this, it does exploit Log4j, and it does give you a shell. Or you can see, does it have an app? Can I literally just get a GUI for this exploit? Because if I'm trying to prove to someone how bad an exploit is, the number of times I've seen light bulbs or fears of deities come into people's eyes is when I go, okay, here's the scan result. It's a CVSS 10. It is very bad. It is remote code execution, and they're looking at me like, yeah, you're saying a lot of words, funny man. And then I go, all right, let's sit down and talk about this. Here's my laptop. Here's your web address. I'm going to go from A to B, and here's your full database listing, and here's my local copy of it. If you don't want to learn how to do your own exploits, if you don't want to spin up Metasploit and learn all those tags, you can come to the exploit database, select your fridge, open the drawer that has your CVE number on it, and go, yep, I want to know it's already working, and you click on these pages, it'll say, yep, you launch this from command line, and you enter these two things, and you point it at your website.
Quick injection here, not to pun, yeah, not to be punny. So don't forget, these are all awesome, but you have to be what? Online. MSF, what can you do? You can search through it using SearchSploit and find all of these same exploits locally contained on your box. Don't have to go out to trip the alarm bells of the blue team, hopefully.
If you've been updated recently.
Exactly, that's fair. And have a listing of those vulnerabilities along with corresponding suggested quality of exploit. Okay, so it ranks them from high, medium, low confidence.
Like a checkbox.
Exactly. It's funny how that works, huh? Where do you think it might be coming from? No. Anyway, so the call out there is that don't forget, if you want to self-contain yourself, you have that option via MSF.
The next item I love, and this has changed in the last, I would say, 3 or so years, is if you have X-ray vision or 2010 vision, there's a little box that says vulnerable app, and what the exploit database has gone, I'm going to take a moment in time, the version of this app is vulnerable, and keep a copy of it. Often it'll be stored in a zip folder. So say you have this exploit in your production application, instead of potentially going like, you know what, I'm going to hit this version of Apache we have running, you can download the vulnerable app and the exploit from the same place and run it. And the same thing goes for downloading these exploits. You will see the exploit code listed beneath the application. Now, I'm not saying every time you go to download an exploit on the internet, trust what the listing says, and you're absolutely not getting something with an additional keylogger in it. But Google Hacking Database has built its reputation on validation. If you don't trust the script, 1, don't run it. 2, also you can look at authors the same way Reddit people folks seek to have validated exploits. It's very fun to be like, I was the person who gave this information to the community. So you'll see author and type, convenient guy named Sam guy, probably a legit Sam. He's great. He gave us this exploit code. He had the vulnerable app, and you see that green check mark, which means other people have validated. Yeah, this exploit does what it says it does, and it works. Anything to add?
We'll leave that one be for now.
And this comes down to when you read the code, make sure you're reading the right code. If you're running these exploits, make sure people know why you're running them. Even if you're on your own team, if you're in a large enough organization and you point your exploit at the wrong thing and bring something down, people are going to get mad. It's easy to say, I'm a security researcher, I did it for this reason, I was validating this. Maybe take the hacking database's copy of the vulnerable app, run it against that. Or else you might go straight to jail right away.
Exactly. So we were going to talk about Wireshark. So what do we use Wireshark for? Well, we use it to sniff, and everybody's familiar with the term sniffing, right? Not
What do you do when you have runny nose?
exactly. Yeah, no. So what we're talking about
Runny
is
packets?
running packets. I like that. So what we've got is we go ahead and capture. Typically what we do is we capture a PCAP, right? Everybody's heard of that before, I hope. Packet capture, PCAP, right? Cool. Do you run your packet capture in Wireshark? Or is Phil Hagen going to come through this computer and yell at all of us if we do that? Yes, no? He's the one that teaches the NetSec 501, whatever it is. He'll tell you very bluntly, no, never capture live within Wireshark. You should be using something like TCP dump. Why? Because if there's active exploits in Wireshark, what's it doing? It's replaying everything. So you have the capability to compromise yourself. So don't do it. Cool? Wireshark, however, is a packet analysis tool. You can still do captures. I would advocate against it. That being said, what do we use it for? We use it to actually inspect what's going on inside of that capture. Okay? We get to see into what that information is that's being tossed back and forth. We've talked about what a packet is. Well, everybody knows what a packet is, right? We don't have to go that low level.
For information.
I'm going to go with that. That's great.
Like a segment or data group?
A little bit
Some
larger.
bits and bytes, if you will.
So
Satellite.
much easier. So I don't remember this one.
You do.
That one?
Yeah. Where do you go? How does data get between those things?
I don't know. How does it?
Series of tubes.
God. Did we actually put it in there? Yeah. So the code here is that all of these devices are communicating. Are they sharing information back and forth? Yes. Are they doing it over the same protocols? Potentially. Are they potentially using other proprietary protocols? Maybe. Depending upon what it is. Everybody's real fond of IoT, SCADA, industrial control systems, all the fun stuff. What's the one thing that may or may not be true of those devices? Are they all talking the same protocols? Probably not. There's also the play of you've got proprietary protocols to a lot of those control systems. So the call out here is that you can sniff all the traffic you want, provided that you have the ability to analyze it after the fact. So if you don't understand that protocol, it's kind of moot to capture all that traffic because you can't understand it. That being said, security by obscurity, any security at all? Negative. So keep in mind what you're going after. Your smart, excuse me, your smartphones still operate over a regular TCP/IP connection. So keep that in mind. You can sniff other things, capture that traffic, and analyze it later.
It's also a reason it's called a TCP dump. If you're looking at all these hosts and you're pulling in promiscuous mode and getting every packet that you can, don't expect it to all make sense. Chances are you are coming in the middle of a conversation. Just because you don't have that initial handshake and synapse doesn't mean it's an illegitimate connection.
Correct. Which is why we always talk about how encryption is so darn important and PFS matters so much and all the other stuff that goes into that, because if you compromise one session and it's a shared session key, you got everything is the downside. So we needed to chat real fast about what's the three-way handshake. Everybody remembers? Synac, ACK, right?
Attack on Mars, ACK.
ACK, yeah. Oh, God. You got to say ACK as you're shooting at me, though, right? Okay. So the three-way handshake here, we can see everything that's taking place. We can see the initial synchronization. We can see it synchronizing back. We can see it acknowledging, yep, send me packets. And then we see it starting to talk, okay? The call out here is that if you see that entire you can potentially see where all of that traffic is going back and forth. You're in that session. You can capture that stream. If there's things that are transmitted data-wise, you can potentially capture them as long as they're not encrypted. If you saw the encryption taking place, you can definitely see those things even though they were encrypted because you can reverse it, okay? All right, so this one was the unfiltered, right? And what's it doing here? So you've got TCP, you've got header checksum, looks like it is connecting up to, oops, did I just click? I did. Looks like it's connecting up
I'm going to ignore
to,
your fancy words, and I'm going to point out that what you have here is a profile in Wireshark. You can tell Wireshark if you see certain things, turn it certain colors. If you're not colorblind, super great tool. If you are colorblind, you can still do shades gray. Other part of it is, if you're looking for handshakes, saying, hey, I want to potentially impersonate someone, or if you're looking for, hey, when this guy gets on his computer, the first 3 websites he goes to are ABC, you can start highlighting those as you want. This is getting more into making Wireshark work for you, but once you build out a profile, you love it, you may hate it, you can always reset it.
and what we've got going on here is a display filter. So IP.dest is equal to 192.168.1.4. What's the call out on 192.168? It is
Private.
exactly. So the call out here is that you are talking internally in a LAN segment. Okay.
Okay.
And also, what are we doing that we shouldn't be? See how the fin is grayed out and you've got the red X or red box? We're doing a capture in Wireshark, which we shouldn't. We should have been dumping it from TCP dump. Now, what do we, go ahead.
No one would run bad stuff locally.
Yeah, no, never. Isn't that how you keep people off your network?
Anyways.
So what we've got going on next is we're now adding additional display filters to the Wireshark interface. So IP.dest equals 192.168.1.4 and HTTP protocol. So now we're starting to limit it to the specific protocol. Now what you should be noticing here, does anybody see something about BWAP? I think we've talked about it,
I'm
right?
pretty sure that's about size 2 font.
Yeah, never mind. Okay. So I can see it because I'm right on top of it. But BWAP is Broken Web App. Where's my
A
cursor?
few items here before you go to the next one.
Mhm.
We're looking at HTTP. If I'm on a network and it's HTTP, it's not encrypted. If I'm on blue team, I'm kind of happy if I see an exploit and their C2 is HTTP because then I see what they're getting out. The downside is on that info, you'll see login.php. If that's over HTTP, congrats, free credentials for it.
Exactly. So next up we see getting information. So the HTTP verb get, we've got 192.168.1.4, HTTP, and IP source 192.168.1.5. What am I doing? I'm narrowing scope down to my machine that's running the broken web application. Actually, I think this was bbug. Anyway, the reason that we call this out is because we're limiting it to just those 2 devices that we know are talking over HTTP protocol using the get verb to pull content down. Okay. Next up, I thought these were meant to be pretty quick. Yeah. And request method, http.request.method equals post. So why do we go after post?
That's when you send it.
Mm-hmm. And what exactly did I send it? Data, yeah. Credential data. So I'm looking for post because typically you would see in the form the post taking place to send that data to the server. What is that data that we're sending? Probably credentials. Oh, look at that. So the call out here is you can use display filtering to run through that content that you captured, not using Wireshark, please, but you've captured that traffic. You use Wireshark to analyze it. And what do I see? I see the admin credentials being passed in the clear, like Brooks mentioned earlier, because it's HTTP, not HTTPS.
That's the same password I have on my luggage.
I know, right? All right. Wireshark harvesting credentials. Do we want to just switch over to the demo at this point? And we're way over on time. So, anybody want to see how this actually works real fast?
2
I'm
options.
going to cheat.
Demo or Nmap?
Demo.
Yay! That means it's your problem.
Yeah, that's fine. All right, so let me get this squared away here real quick.
Demo's never fail.
I know, we didn't pray to the demo gods. We're in trouble.
I put a spoon
I'm
on
just
their
in
bankroll
trouble.
last
Yeah,
night.
did you? Okay.
Yeah, demo go great.
Way to jinx it even worse.
You're the one running 2 VMs off a tablet. I know.
Hey, I have faith.
One
It's
of
probably
us.
misplaced, aborted. Awesome.
Is that Ubuntu?
Oh, wait, which one? Yeah,
Or is that WM?
I'm not running that one. I better not be running that one. It was off, yeah. Well, that's not going to go well.
So upside, Kali Linux will be our source VM. This Kali Linux distribution of Debian has tons of tools loaded into it. If you have never red teamed and you don't want to run off a thing called tools on your desktop, that's a folder you put all your code in, absolutely start with Kali. It's updated. Many people love it. You'll find tutorials for capturing the flags that will mention Kali Linux. We're to the point where if you have a Windows machine that supports Windows subsystem for Linux, you can download Kali Linux off of the Windows Store and run it on your Windows box without even having to have the power to host a VM. On the other side, we will be having Metasploitable 2 as our target. Metasploitable is a project that goes, yeah, we are really just going to put everything that's bad and wrong to do on one VM. It may not be all-inclusive, but if you want to do things like attack SMB, instead of going to Showdown and browsing the internet for a vulnerable SMB you do not own, instead of building your own server and setting up SMB improperly and hoping you can get out-of-date Windows ISO and host it, you can go to Metasploitable. There are write-ups on it, both Metasploitable 1 and Metasploitable 2 for the vulnerable services. Keep both of these in your pocket, and next time someone goes, hey, why is this exploit bad? Chances are you can replay it in real time.
So
Thank you for listening to this podcast. We are sponsored today by free tools that are not paying me to mention free tools.
exactly. So we're going to use just Kali Linux for this one just to start with, and then we'll switch gears and run over to the SMB one if we have time. So real quick, has everybody heard of Social Engineering Toolkit?
If you haven't, you just said it. Commonly called SET.
Yep. Dave Kennedy was kind enough to donate this to the community. Like I said before, seek out those opportunities that we can give back to our community. Dave Kennedy is real fond of giving back to his, and we ended up with the Social Engineering Toolkit. Now, what I'm going to do, who here remembers just minutes ago where we showed HTTPS and an admin login? No? Okay, me neither. Cool. So we're at the main menu. We're going to say social engineering attacks, 1. We're going to say website attack vectors, 2. We're going to say credential harvester attack method. And we are going to say web templates, 1. And we are going to say enter. And it's operating on loopback at this point. And we're going to go ahead and say Twitter. Okay, so you see what it says. Cloning the website, blah, blah, blah. This could take a little bit. Social engineering toolkit, credential harvester attack. The credential harvester is running on port 80. Information will be displayed to you as it arrives below. So what I've got happening inside of Kali, I've got it running its own local web server, and I can go ahead and navigate to it.
You can try.
I can try. It's true.
Callouts for this, same toolkit. What you're doing, you copy their login screen. So bad phishing emails, take a screenshot of it, and as soon as you click it, it takes you to a Google form to put in your credentials. Better phishing toolkits, they will copy the style code of it, put it in the email, and have it in a little mess, and it looks pretty legitimate. Worse toolkits, maybe an item that's live and gets broken because Twitter says you can't do that. But all of these come down to as close to the source as you can get when you're impersonating someone, the more likely people are to believe you. While this may not be twitter.com, if I see numbers in my address bar, it might be suspicious. But everything else is pulled directly from the source, so of course it's going to look like the source.
And a quick call out is, what do we see? I don't know if anybody can see
Open a
it.
new tab.
What's that? Open a new tab. Why? Can anybody see that there's the broken padlock icon? The reason that we call that out is it's operating over HTTP. The browser is at least smart enough to warn you about it. But if I run something like ngrok, so I have my own tunneling, I at that point would not see the padlock being broken. Okay, so I can go ahead and get something to run it through a secure connection and hide the fact that it's not running from the expected certificate. But as you can see here, well, that's a bad example.
Redtop@hotmail.com.
You betcha. And you'll see the browser behavior here of trying to cache those credentials. And you just get redirected. Huh, that's weird, right? But what do we see?
Real Twitter, yay.
Real Twitter.
I can log in again. Nothing bad happened.
Oh no, not at all. Ruh-roh. So we see our real-time credentials being delivered there. So that's one example. Do we want to do the SMB? I really don't know if they're both going to run.
We're done.
You want to sit up there?
We're done.
We're over now. I'm going to call it there. Yeah.
Let's come back to part two.
Okay. What, 30 more slides?
Part two and part
I told you we had too many. He's like, oh no,
Yeah.
it'll go fast. I'm like, neither of us shut up.
Yeah,
so.
that's bad.
Educational.
Excellent.
I would say,
Welcome. Good job. I'm not scared. Truth. All right. I'm going to kill this
It
here.
would be really interesting to have, each of you have your own.
Thanks for joining.
So that was a really cool demonstration. Downloading a Twitter web page.
Yep.
That wasn't a real account, was it?
No.
I was gonna say.
If you replay this presentation, if you want to take his credits to
Don't say that.
You could use that for your Twitter
No, I was
account.
just kind of like, was it because of like redirected to Twitter and, I don't know.
So the way that works is social engineering toolkit, you pick your website, and certain websites have only username, password fields on their sites. Things like that sign-in button would take you to a legitimate sign-in link. Because when early in teaching people to spot fish, you tell them to hover. So if they're hovering all these different things, the social engineering toolkit's gonna scrape all that and post it for you. The difference is when you click post, instead of redirecting and sending that to Twitter and logging you in, I'm taking a copy of it and then sending you on. So if that were real credentials, I take my copy and I send you on your way. And you log in versus some fish, if you hit post, it just sits there and you're like, this is weird, and you go to your bookmark tabs and go somewhere else.
I do the same thing with GoFish. When I run a social engineering test, same thing. I basically usually just copy the websites, and then I'll take the credentials, whatever I'm testing for, and yeah, they'll click log in, and they'll just redirect them right back to where they were going.
So there was also, everybody's familiar with Wi-Fi Pineapple, right?
No.
Yeah.
I don't even.
Good answers, bro.
register those people.
Someone has to say no, because if you're like, hey, everyone knows this, right, the person who doesn't know, you're like, dang, there's a lot of this reason. Why don't I know that?
That's fair.
So I know nothing, ever. You're gonna have to explain it.
So Wi-Fi Pineapple, the entire premise is that it's based upon the German Yassiger, I can't remember how to pronounce it. Anyway, it's basically just, the way your wireless works is it's constantly beaconing out of, hey, are you this API now? Hey, are you this API now? And the Wi-Fi Pineapple just says yes every single time to everything. So what ends up happening is you end up identifying all of those wireless devices in the vicinity of the Wi-Fi Pineapple that have been attempting to connect to an IP that it does know about. And again, Wi-Fi Pineapple just says yes to everything, so it starts logging all of that. There's this cool thing of twin AP attack. What we do is we copy the behavior of the wireless access point that we want to steal and harvest credentials from. So everybody's familiar with those captive portals. We can go to a hotel, Best Western, or whatever.
No.
We're gonna be watching you, click X to accept the fact we'll be watching you, and we'll give you free Wi-Fi.
Exactly.
Do that stuff.
But they a lot of times also require credentials to get in which case I can capture those credentials because I pretend I am that active portal, that captive portal, excuse me. And I capture those credentials at the time that they authenticate in.
And now I have free Wi-Fi and that's fine.
You sit on the top floor where all the pretty rooms are, then you sniff their room number and last name, go back down to your room, and be like, yes,
You don't
I
need
did
Wi-
play for the,
You don't need pineapple for that though, you just guess.
room 400 ground, dang it, room 400, dang it.
That's why I find that was pretty